Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
I am Preeti Philip from Bridge Global, the organization that hosts this event. Bridge Global is a Netherlands-based technology company, and TechWhizz is one of our many initiatives to enrich the tech and business community. This webinar is a prelude to something great that is coming up. A business idea pitching contest as part of the 2023 edition of TechWhizz. I'll be sharing more details at the end of the session. And now, without further ado, let's start today's webinar. Let me introduce the speaker, Hugo Messer. He is a renowned agile entrepreneur who has been building companies since a young age. He is the founder of Bridge Global, an offshore software development company with a core development center in India, founder of Equipa Indonesia, an agile innovation consultancy, founder of Superchargers, an ecosystem to offer hands-on help to founders, and a partner at Bali Investment Club. And he's part of many more initiatives, many more innovative initiatives. And just a little housekeeping before we start. Please keep yourself muted throughout the session. If you have any questions during the presentations, please wait till the exclusive Q&A session at the end. In the Q&A session, you can press the raise hand button that you find at the bottom of the screen and can ask directly to the speaker. You can even type your questions in the chat box. I will bring them, all these questions, to the speaker's notice at the right time. If you are not asking any question, please keep yourself muted throughout the live Q&A and the session. And now let's start our session. I'll turn the time over to Hugo Messer now. Hugo, I welcome you. It's all yours now.
Thank you, Preeti. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Okay, that's good. Let me share my screen before I start talking. Here is okay. I think this is visible, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, yeah, so I'm Hugo Messer, and the topic of today is how to get started if you're thinking about entrepreneurship or a startup, and then also I'll discuss things around what is holding you back, because for many budding entrepreneurs, it's very challenging to leave a safe job and then make the leap into startup space. So a lot of reasons are there to not make the leap and not to start. So I'll discuss that today and then share some of my experiences and how to overcome that and some tools and tricks to get there. So this is the topics that I want to discuss: the barriers, how to get unblocked, some tools and tips, and then also some tips for pitching. Although I'm not a super experienced pitcher, but I do think that I know what ingredients to put there to make a good impression. Now let's start here. So first of all, I think that an entrepreneur has and an entrepreneur for me is somebody who starts a startup or who works in an existing company and tries out new things, new business models, new kinds of businesses. So an entrepreneur first of all tries to break rules. And I think this is a very important one, because if you want to start something from scratch, you do need to kind of bend the rules in your advantage. It's not that easy to get a startup off the ground if you follow all the rule books. And of course, you don't need to break any laws, but I think this is more about going beyond boundaries and thinking out of the box. So an entrepreneur also imagines the impossible. And Richard Branson, that you see on the right here, wrote a book about this. It's called Screw It, Let's Do It. And you can also see it in younger entrepreneurs, like, for example, Elon Musk. He comes up with very crazy ideas that are far off, But by doing this, he also moves his people and himself beyond their comfort zone. And this is what eventually creates breakthrough through businesses and startups. So an entrepreneur also sees problems as challenges. And I think that's a very important one, because one of the main reasons people stay where they are is I see problems. And when I think about my startup idea, I see more problems than challenges. And this holds me back. So for me personally, problems, at least this is what I came to learn over time, problems are the lifeblood of an entrepreneur. So without problems, there's actually nothing to do. So I started embracing problems, I think especially in the last 10 years, because these are the things that an entrepreneur exists for. Like there are problems in starting a business, there's problems in running a business, in growing a business. Wherever you are, there's always problems. There's problems with your wife, with your family, everything. And I think this is what an entrepreneur needs to do, embrace them and not shy away from them. And the last thing is, an entrepreneur always asks why. So why are things the way they are? Because this is the thing or the ingredient where you can find problems that are worth solving. So why are things the way they are? Why are people behaving in a certain way? Why do people tell you certain things? By challenging all of that and always being curious and asking why, you can uncover opportunities for a business and for improvement. That was my intro. A bit about myself. So as Preeti already said, I'm a Dutch guy. We have a lot of cows and wooden shoes in Holland. That's why I put this image here. When I was, I think, 11, I already knew that, I want to be an entrepreneur. I had an uncle who had a business, and he became very rich. He had a Porsche 911, and I thought, oh, wow, I would like to have one as well when I grow up. I don't have one, by the way, because I don't think that's a good idea at this era, but I'll get back to that later. However, I thought from a young age, I want to be a startup guy. I don't want to work for anybody, and I want to start up my own company. To get there, after my high school, I did an MBA, and I thought MBA is a very good way to prepare yourself for startup space, for starting your own company. Looking back at it, I think it was and it was not, because at that time, and I think that has changed, MBAs educated people to work in a very big corporation. And big corporations are maybe even the opposite of what a startup is about. It's about bureaucracy, about rules, about getting everything fixed in place, whereas startups are fluid and try to explore new territory. So this MBA, when I graduated, I thought I know everything. I've got it figured out. I learned all the theories about finance, about business, whatever. And now I will be a successful entrepreneur. And that was actually a little harder than I thought. But I started the startup straight out of university, which was it was when the internet bubble almost burst. So the idea came up, or we started working on this startup while the internet bubble was still not a bubble. It was still a bubble, it hadn't popped yet. So we joined a startup competition, a business pitching, idea pitching competition actually, and we submitted it in that competition, which was organized by Accenture at that time. And to our big surprise, we won the competition. And the reward that we got for winning this was a little bit of cash. I think it was 10 or 15,000 euros or dollars. And we got 200,000 euros in consulting hours from Accenture. Now, I thought at that time, oh, that's very cool. But looking back at it, that's probably what also killed us, because Accenture and all the other big consultancies, maybe they have changed, but at that time, they had no idea how startups work, how to help entrepreneurs. So we ended up spending 3 months with, I think, 4 consultants who burned the 200,000 in those 3 months, producing a new business plan with a very nice Excel sheet. And they said, oh, this business can work and it can become profitable. And the idea was, we're going to pitch this to investors. There was a lot of VCs that were interested, but this was exactly when the bubble burst. So when we were ready with Accenture, we had a very nice business plan, great consultants that would also help us to pitch to VCs. But because the internet bubble burst, nobody wanted to invest anything. It was a very unlucky timing. We did try for 1 year to build it bootstrap from scratch, but it didn't work out. We got a bit of business, but it didn't work. So after this experience of 1.5 years, I stopped the startup. I gave up, and that was my first failure. Now, at that time, I had no more money, and I had to get a job. And as I said before, my plan was not ever to get a job, because I think working for a boss sucks, which is why I write "work sucks" here. But I had to, because if you don't have money, you don't have a lot of choice there. So I worked for a boss for 1.5 years, and it was actually a good experience, because you learn stuff that you don't learn if you work for yourself all the time, because you talk to yourself a lot when you're a single founder, but you don't have people around you that give you feedback and give you opportunities for reflection and growing. So after that 1.5 years, I made my first trip to India. My sister was doing a volunteering traineeship in Mumbai, and I had never been outside Europe, and I thought, oh wow, India sounds very cool. So this is when I was still very young, and I was laying in the Rajasthan desert thinking about what to do with the rest of my life. And that's when I came up with the idea, let's do an outsourcing business. So Bridge Global, I started in 2005, and because of the experience that I had with the startup, this was actually with two partners. I had decided I do it alone. So I'm not going to go with any partners, because that took a lot of energy. So I started Bridge Global alone, without any experience, without any network, thinking that, oh, I can find clients in Holland that would outsource their software development to companies in India. And I also had no companies in India. So I decided to start with Ukraine. At that time, there was no war yet. And I had two guys, Dimitri and Yuri, two brothers in Odessa, who started, like one was a programmer, one was a designer. And with them, I started Bridge Global. So I did the sales, I tried to find clients. And then when I got a contract, I made a fixed price agreement and outsourced that to the guys in Ukraine and doubled their price. So I got their proposal, did it ×2, and then sold it to the client. And over time, this started working. And right now, Bridge is a flourishing company. It's been around for almost 20 years. And I was there 2 months ago, and I think everything looks healthy. People are happy, and the company is running very well. But before I got there, in these 10 years from 2005 till 2015, I cried many times. So I think this is also what I said before. When you have, like, the livelihood or the passion of an entrepreneur should be about problems. But of course, if you don't have problems, life gets easier. Sometimes in the early days, you don't know how to deal with problems. You don't know how to solve them. So in that period, I had many, but I think there is no way around that. So I cried a lot of times. I got frustrated. I got lawsuits. I got people running away. I got clients that were unhappy because I couldn't manage the work with India. So there's a lot of things that you need to learn on the road to becoming a successful company. But fortunately, as an entrepreneur, normally you kind of have a reality distortion field, and you don't see those problems up front. You only see them when you face them, because otherwise you would never start. Now in 2015, I was kind of done with the business that I was running, at least my role in it. Bridge is still existing and flourishes, but my role at that time was mostly to do the business development. I flew to India often. So I decided in 2015, I think it's time for me to step aside and empower the great team that I had at that time and still have to lead the company into the future. So in 2015, that's what I did. And then I think Krishna is in this call, took over as CEO to lead the company forward. And that's already going on for 7 years. All great. And the good news for me was I could move to Bali, which is where I am right now. So in 2016, I did that after a short trip. I took my 3 kids and my wife to Bali, and our idea was to do an experiment, lean startup style, for just 1 year to see, is everybody happy on Bali? Are the kids happy at school? Do we want to live here? What else can we do? And since then, we are extending it per year. So it's kind of, running a startup, but then apply to life and deciding where to live. Over the last few years, as I moved to Bali, I set up several companies. As Preeti said, Equipa is an agile consultancy. So in Bridge, I gained a lot of experience in making Scrum or agile teams that work for clients in the West. So we use a lot of Scrum and agile to service the customers. And I found that this works a lot better than a more waterfall type of approach. So when I came to Indonesia, I just started doing some Scrum training in Jakarta and as an experiment. And that seemed to be interesting to the Indonesian market. So since then, in the last 5-6 years, I built a team around agile consulting, agile coaching, agile transformations for bigger companies, bigger enterprises in Indonesia. And this company has a team of around 20 people in Jakarta and also a team in Singapore and Malaysia. So it's been growing quite well. And I also learned that because the business is similar to Bridge, but it's a different type of service. It's still a service business. So the second time is a lot easier because you know all those problems that you cried about. So you know how to avoid them, how to deal with them when they arise. You also know better how to make better business models, how to make deals with clients, etc. So I found that the second time it was a lot easier. Since last year, I started a few new initiatives. So the Bali Investment Club is there, which is a angel network investing in impact startups. It's about sustainability. I'll tell a bit more about that later on. And then I also started Superchargers, which is basically it's a team, a venture builder helping startups not only through money, but also through sweat equity. So we help them with a team of experienced entrepreneurs to structure the work. So that's a program of 6 to 12 months in which we help them 1 day per week with strategy, with partnerships, with market introductions, anything that the startup needs in order to get to the next stage and become investable. So that's about me. One of the things that I wanted to discuss today is mental blockers. As I said before, when you've not yet started, or maybe you have started the startup and you have some scars because it didn't succeed, your brain starts giving you a lot of reasons for not doing it. It keeps you where you are. So you don't make the leap, you don't change from your job because you're scared or whatever else it is. The first mental blocker that I always recognize is, and I don't have that because I have too many of them, but many people think that, to get started, I need an idea, right? So without an idea, I can't start. Now, if you think that way, you will sit there forever thinking that, the only way to start a startup is to become Einstein and come up with some genius idea, like an epiphany, and then I'll start. Now, if you tell yourself that's the thing you need to start, you might never get started because it depends on your brain. Like some brains have plenty of ideas, like mine. Some people don't have ideas. But the beauty of this is if you have other people that have ideas, then probably there's a solution there, right? So the first one is don't tell yourself that you need ideas to get started. You do need it, of course, but this does not need to prevent you from starting. Second thing is people think you need money. These are rupiahs, but rupees could also be into this shopping basket. So people think that I need money in order to get started, which I think in the last decade, it has been reinforced because most startups go with angel investors, they go with VCs, and you see all this news of this company has raised Series A or whatever, $50 million. Now, I'm a firm believer that especially in the beginning, you do not need money at all. Even if you get money at an early stage, it might kill you because money, it's better to be without money because it makes you more creative. And you'll build a business that is based on scarcity instead of having too much. So for me personally, I would absolutely never take money like 10 million, 20 million from a VC because first of all, you'll get too much of it. And the second is I would be very scared every night on how am I going to spend the money of other people responsibly. So I think, and third thing is you have to give away a big part of your company if you want to get a big amount of money, especially in the early days. So again, people think that in order to get started, I need money. And this is again a mental blocker because yes, at some stage you do need money, but this money does not necessarily need to come from an investor. You can also do it by providing great services or products, or you could borrow a little bit of money from a bank or from a family member, or maybe you've had some savings in the past. instead of thinking this is without money, I cannot start. Third mental blocker I recognize is that people think I need a co-founder. As I said, my first startup, I started with 2 other guys, and it has pros and cons to have a co-founder. The benefit is you have multiple brains that can look at the challenges, the ideas, and the path forward. But the flip side of that is that you need to adjust with the co-founder. So you need to speak about who's going to do what, and they actually never do what you think or expect from them. Like with colleagues, like it's the same with co-founders. You get a lot of tension there on who does what. So you have to define that. Then you also have to define how do we make a division in the shares? So who gets what percentage of shares? And this is usually a very sensitive topic and hard to define because there is nothing yet. And everybody always thinks that I deserve the biggest piece of the pie because I did most. So you get a lot of tension on adjustment. Whereas if you started alone, you can actually decide everything by yourself, provided that you have the discipline and the motivation to do it by yourself. So again, the third thing is people tell themselves, I need a co-founder. Without it, I cannot start, right? Another mental blocker. And then the fourth thing is people think you need knowledge and experience. Now, I may be a bit ignorant. And when I started my first company, Bridge Global, as we've discussed before, I called my uncle, the one that I mentioned earlier, who inspired me. And he said to me, look, Hugo, you're very green. You don't know anything about this outsourcing business. You have no contacts in India or Ukraine. You've never done a software project. I would recommend that you first work in a company, gain the experience, work there for 2-3 years, and then start it on your own. And I thought, yeah, there's some merit in what he says. But at the same time, I'm an entrepreneur, and I really believe that I can learn faster if I go it alone and I just do it. As I said before, screw it, let's do it. So I decided to go it alone. But I see a lot of people who prefer to just gain the experience first before they make the leap. What I think, especially if you work in a bigger company, you learn stuff, but you learn a very small part of what it takes to start and run a business. So even though, yes, you'll know stuff, you will still lack a lot of knowledge. So that for me is a reason to just start without going for a job first. So I think many people tell themselves, I don't know enough yet, and that's why I don't start. And again, this is a mental blocker which you could actually continue believing in until you're 65 and then you never start. The other thing is, if you believe first I gain 10 years of experience, in the meantime, you get kids, you get a wife, you get a mortgage, you get a very good salary from your employer, and that makes it actually harder to make the jump. So when you're young, I think it's better to start at that point because you got nothing to lose. So don't use that as a mental blocker either. Now the fifth one, and I think this is where most people struggle, is fear of failure. So people are afraid. They think, if I start a startup and I leave my job, then I'll lose my status, I will lose the income that I generate for my family, and that can be a very risky thing. And that's true. But I also think that it should never be the reason that it holds you back. As I said, if you start early, you got less to lose. And there is only one way to find out if you're born to be a startup and see if you can make it work, is just start.
Oh, you're on mute.
Hugo, you are on mute. Can you please unmute?
Yeah, sorry about that. I guess I hit my mouse. So I think it was only a few seconds. So this fifth blocker that I was speaking about is about fear of failure. And I think the main way to overcome this is to just start, to stop telling yourself, I'm scared and I've got so much to lose, and things can actually go wrong. And yes, they will go wrong. But as I said before, problems are what makes entrepreneurs tick. So I think it's about just taking the leap at one point when you're ready. And don't be afraid of failure, because failure is actually, for me at least, it doesn't exist. I never think about failure. I only think about if something goes wrong, I'll learn something from it, and I'm going to try everything I can to avoid it the next time. So I don't really see how I can fail. What could be is, and I think this is especially in a society like India, failure might be, oh, my family thinks I failed and I made the wrong decision. Instead of going to work for a renowned company like TCS or Infosys, I go it alone, I make this startup, and I'm not earning money. For me personally, I don't care what other people think. Maybe this is also because of my Western mentality, but I've always believed that if I believe in something and I want to go somewhere, I'll just do it, no matter what people tell me. And of course, you need to listen to feedback, constructive criticism or constructive feedback that can help you stay on the right track. But if the fear of failure is based in what other people tell you or what they think about you, this is, again, it's a mental problem, and it doesn't need to be that way. And one way to overcome that might be to just live in another country where people think differently for a while. So those are the 5 mental blockers. I would like to take 2 minutes for people to just reflect on what I've shared so far, because otherwise I'm just doing a monologue here. So let's take 2 minutes for you to think about, okay, what kind of mental blockers do I have? Write it down on a paper maybe, or put it into your laptop. What are your mental blockers? Think about the 5 that I shared, and then think about your own situation. And by the way, if you are audacious enough, then maybe in the Q&A session, please share one of your mental barriers, and then maybe you can attach it to a question so we can have a discussion about it. Okay, that was a bit less than 2 minutes, but if you need to write more, just continue while I'm going to the next one. So now that we've discussed the mental blockers, the question is, how do we get unblocked? Now, many people think again, where do I get my idea? And as I said, for me personally, it's much easier to get ideas than it is to start something, because the execution is eventually what matters. It's not about generating ideas. So I think even today you have Google. I saw this OpenAI chatbot last week, or the new OpenAI software. If you ask that bot, what are the best ideas for 2023 to start a business, I'm pretty sure that this AI robot is going to give you some fantastic ideas. So getting ideas should never be the problem. And there's many things that need to be fixed. So I put a few things here in this slide that inspired me lately. As I said, I'm doing a lot of impact investing. So I'm very keen to help create companies and to invest in companies that help solve our climate change, our climate problem. But other ideas that you could work on is, for example, AI, or you could also look at this book. It's called Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus. There is a TED Talk from the author available online as well. And what he talks about is how the digital companies like Facebook, like Google, like Amazon are actually constructed in a way that is not a very healthy economic system. So looking at, for example, that video, it could trigger ideas on how can we start new companies that remove the failure or the economic engine that those companies are built upon. How can we create something new, which, for example, uses blockchain technology or a more inclusive and distributed way of having shareholders and serving customers, serving the community that the company serves, instead of selling people's minds or brains as a product through Instagram or through Facebook. So you could also look at experts who shed a light on how the current economic model or current businesses are not working perfectly, and then see, can I start something to solve that? Can I start a business in a new way? So I think these are some ideas of like some starting point for ideas. Another way, of course, could be to partner up with somebody who has a lot of ideas or who already started something. And usually entrepreneurs, especially early stage founders, have a lot of ideas. So you could also ask people, do you have any ideas for me? Yeah? You can ask an AI robot, you can ask some other founders and ask around. So the source of ideas does not necessarily need to be you sitting in a cave for 3 days and then coming up with this genius idea. Now, one thought on that is this book. It's called The Heart of Business. It's got to do with something completely different, but what I've liked about this book is that he describes, if you want to start a business, the starting point should always be people. So people as in, I could choose, for example, a specific segment in my community or in my city that I would like to serve. Maybe it's related to a specific industry. So it could be, tech for social media, or it could be tech for property because I like property. So I could think about what people do I want to serve, and I also think about how do I want to have employees in my business and how do I want to serve them, because it's serving people, serving clients, serving people, employees is all the same. So that could be your starting point, and then figure out how can I build a business around this. So what kind of business can I create to service those people, to solve problems that they have? I'm reading another book, for example, about a guy who set up a charity to provide water to people in Africa. So he was there, he got very sad when he saw people were taking very dirty water from wells that had been there exposed to the sun for a long time, so green water. And then he figured, okay, I want to help those people and solve that water problem for them. And he started a charity or a business around this. So what this author basically said, and I think this is the right starting point, first look at who do you want to serve, and then figure out what kind of business can I create to serve those people or to solve a problem. And then only think about how am I going to make money out of it. So it's in this chronological order. So this could be a starting point for a business. First, look around and think, what people do I like and what people would I like to help? Now, after you've figured out an idea, here's a couple of things that helped me in getting started and also in creating structure and discipline in the way I go about my days. So this one is about rocks and monkeys. So rocks means if you figured out what you're going to do, you need to define what rocks or what key priorities do I need to solve within the next 1 quarter, 2 quarters, or maybe 1 year. Don't look too much further. So once you've defined the big rocks that you need to carry up the mountain, you can prioritize them and it becomes easier to tackle them one by one. So you need to do one rock at a time, not all at the same time. Now, this book is a classic one. It can help you to decide what are the important rocks that I have. So this is first things first. I think everybody must have seen this. If not, I recommend anybody actually to read this book. He has 4 quadrants, and the key is, especially in the early days of a startup, of getting started, you need to focus your time in quadrant 2, the one in the right top. So these are the things that are important. So they're crucial, they're important stuff, but they are not urgent, right? So your urgent stuff, the urgent and important, quadrant 1, is usually stuff that you need to do in your work or in your family for your job. So you spend most of your time in that quadrant, but creating your future, creating your startup happens in quadrant 2. So it's the important, not urgent stuff. And by prioritizing those, it becomes easier for you to see, okay, what are the main rocks that I need to carry up this mountain? And the second thing is just start. I've said it several times during this presentation, but I think this is crucial. You need to take this first step, because if you think about all the steps that you need to take in order to make something successful, you will probably never move. So the key is take that complex, long road into what's the first small step that I can take this year or maybe this week or maybe even today, and then take that step. Just start moving. And then from there, you can start iterating. Now, one concept that helps a lot here is Lean Startup, which has build, measure, learn, right? And if you're doing something like a service or maybe you want to create a product, the key is your starting point can be to build a very simple version of your service. So for example, in my case, when I started Bridge, I started looking, okay, I want to start outsourcing web projects to people in Ukraine. So my first MVP was find a programmer who can actually help me. So I found that programmer through contact, and then from there I iterated. So the second question was, how do I get a client? And I started looking around on the internet. There were some freelance websites. I started spamming some people, and eventually somebody said, okay, Hugo, I trust you, great story, here's a project, please make me a proposal. Right? So you build a very simple version of your project. You launch that, so you start talking to people, this is my new product or this is my new service. You expose them to it, you start generating feedback or data, right? Your measurement, so that's the second thing here, measure. And from that you learn. So you collect data, which can be qualitative or quantitative. You get insights from that, and those insights lead you to the next version. So again, you take a very small step, you define a minimum step that you can take in order to get started and generate feedback. And then from there, you keep iterating through these loops. Yeah? So simply start. And then once you get started, the key is to keep going and to never stop. And I think this is also important because, as I said, problems are going to occur. And some problems are very big, like you have no cash on your bank account if you're a startup. All of that is part of the journey, and you need to keep going. You should never give up and always use your creativity and resourcefulness to get over every problem that you face. And I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who at a certain point throw in the towel and stop. They go back to their job. And I think this is the biggest mistake that you can make, because once you've started, once you've gained momentum, once you overcame all these blockers that I've discussed before, I think the key is to just keep going. Because if you keep going, you will always find a way to make your business work. And sometimes your business has to change, or your partner has to change. But again, that's a problem. So your partner is not good, your product is not good, it's a problem you need to solve. So if you continue, logically, you keep solving those problems, in the end, you will get to something that really works. Last point that Preeti asked me to discuss is, how do you pitch your idea? Now, as I said, I'm not a super good pitcher, but here's some of the stuff. First of all, I think, especially in the early days, when it's just an idea or just a few guys that are thinking about something to start, don't protect your idea, right? So forget about NDAs, forget about keeping your idea secret, because for investors, for experienced entrepreneurs, ideas are cheap. There is no golden idea. The only thing that's there is golden execution. So if your starting point is, I want to protect my idea because it's so good, nobody can know it, any entrepreneur, any investor would immediately start doubting you, because you think the key to your startup is your idea, and it's not, right? It's about the execution. Second tip is, try to explain it to your grandma. If she doesn't live anymore, you could make a fictional grandmother. But the key is to explain your idea in such simple terms that your grandmother would also understand what you're talking about. Because I see a lot of startups and pitch decks and also bigger businesses that put a lot of blah, blah, and people get lost. You know, for some people it sounds impressive, but if you want to sell your idea to other people, which means getting investors or employees or co-founders, you need to make it very simple. So the key for this is what they call the elevator pitch. If you go into an elevator, usually it takes about 1 minute to get to the floor that you want to go to. So you need to be able to explain your idea within that 1 minute. And that's the key. So make it short so your grandmother understands, and you can do it within 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes. When you get to a deck or a pitch deck that you want to use in the presentation of your idea, I think the most important part is this first. So you need to explain why your idea or why your business is existing. Why do you think that the next 5 or 10 years you will dedicate your life to this idea? So you need to speak about the why and your passion about the thing, or about the people that you select, or the people that you want to service, right? So that's where you start. You explain your passion and drive. And then you go through all the boring stuff. So you need to present what is the business model. So you can have an idea, but if it doesn't have a business model, then you also have a hard time explaining or convincing people that this can work, because every business needs an engine to start running. So you need to explain a business model. You need to work on a financial model. Again, it depends a bit on the stage of the pitch that you're making or who you are pitching to. If it's really purely idea, then maybe you start with only the elevator pitch, but once there's investors or more serious, deep-going conversations, I think you also need to present your financial model. Of course, you also need to explain what makes you unique, what kind of problem and solution you're going to work on in the next 5 or 10 years. But all of these ingredients, I think you can find online. You Google pitch deck, and then you'll find it. But my message is explain it to your grandmother and show your passion. I think those are the 2 key takeaways from how I would start pitching. Short conclusion before we go to Q&A. So create clear priorities. When you want to start, you have to focus on what are my rocks. Yeah? You focus them and then start executing. One rock at a time. Maybe your rock is something you can do today or in the next 1 month. No matter what, make it small and then just start. And then you need to build a system around this that can work for yourself. So you need to prioritize. You need to find a way to get out of bed every day and get the work done. You also need to think about what's holding you back. So what are your constraints or your mental blockers? And then once you get started, you should never give up. That's my conclusion. So thanks for listening. I always find it a bit awkward in a webinar to not see anyone, but I hope the message came across, and I hope some of you have questions.
Thank you very much, Hugo. And it was really interesting to hear about an exciting journey from an entrepreneur himself. And I'm sure the attendees have enjoyed the session, and they have surely got something to kindle the spark in them. Okay, as you said, we'll go ahead and take some time for the questions. And we already got one from Amanda. Amanda asks, this is her question. So it is to my understanding that as an entrepreneur, you shouldn't be scared of going to face problems. How do you handle such when one problem comes across? Because this is a situation where it keeps coming up more than one could imagine.
Well, first reaction that I have, I would not imagine all the problems that could occur later on. I would focus on that one problem that you're facing right now. So the key is you face a problem and then you solve that. So an example, one of the startups that I help in Jakarta is a virtual racing app. So they have technology or an app, virtual racing for marathons. So if you want to if you're a runner, then you can join, you take a membership in that app, and then you basically track the amount of kilometers that you're running. So you can do it on a treadmill, you can run outside, but it tracks it in that marathon app. And it can also be a live marathon. Now, this guy has a tough time this year because COVID was great for him. Of course, marathons couldn't be organized, but virtually it could still be done. So he had a good business. And now, the second half of this year, it gets a bit tougher. He's got some cash problems. So what I discussed with him this morning is that, okay, the problem is you have a tough time paying salaries by the end of the month. But when I digged a bit deeper, it was he has money coming in. So he has the revenues. He's invoiced enough to pay salaries for the next 2 months, but the clients didn't pay yet. And he also has upcoming marathons in Q1, which will secure money probably by the end of Q1 for next year. So basically, the problem, if you analyze it, is about not getting the money from the clients fast enough. So then you know what's the problem. You can try to find a solution for this. So what we discussed this morning is one solution is invoice financing. So there's peer-to-peer lending platforms that are happy to provide you with this gap. So if I send the invoice for $1,000 today, but the client pays in 2 months, they will give you the $1,000. You pay him back after the 2 months when you're from the client. So this is one solution. The other one we discussed was to see, is there any angel investor that could put in some money so that we can fill the gap, right? So I think it's about keeping a quiet mind, analyzing the problem, and then just start finding solutions one by one. Now, money is usually a very stressful one for entrepreneurs. But again, when this example is, he's stressed about money, but it's a solvable problem. I'm not sure if that answers the question, Amanda, I hope.
Amanda, I think you got the right answer, right? And there is one more question from Shravani. She starts with a compliment. Thank you, Hugo, for the insightful session. Very interesting and lots of new perspectives. For students to get started, do you think it is a good idea to participate in business competitions? That's a question.
Yeah, okay, great question. Okay, so here's my personal answer for my life. Yeah, after that experience that I had in 2001 pitching for this Accenture competition, I thought, oh, fantastic. Because we won, we got a lot of attention. We were on the front page of the main financial newspaper in Holland, and I thought, very good start. But looking back at it, I thought it actually killed our business because of the reward that we got with the consulting hours. So me personally, I would not do that again because of that experience. However, I think nowadays the market is also more mature. So those guys at Accenture had no idea how to organize this, nor how to help us. So they could organize it, but they didn't know how to help us. I think joining a business plan competition is good because you practice certain things. You practice going from an idea in your mind or with a group of friends to putting it on paper and then getting feedback. So in that respect, I think it is good. But I think it should not be the key thing, or you shouldn't rely on business plan competitions or incubators or accelerators to get started and thinking that, oh, if I join that, that's where I can actually become successful. Because the startups here, and I don't know how it is in India, the ones that are successful are the ones that would be successful no matter what. So I see some startups that join, incubator A, accelerator B, and then you see them everywhere. Every accelerator that is organized, their logo will be there. So they make it kind of a race to join all the accelerators. And I think that's not the way to get started, because you kind of become dependent on other people to help you or to tell you how to run your business. And I think it really has to come from inside. But so again, it's a good experience and a good starting point to validate your ideas, but I wouldn't rely on accelerators, incubators, and competitions to get going. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Hugo. And we have one more question. It is from Vishnu. During investor pitch, is it important to explain the investors what milestones are to set to achieve the goal to implement the idea?
Yeah, I mean, of course, yes, great question. And of course, you have to, it depends a bit on the stage, but any investor would want to know, if I give you $20,000 or $200,000, what are you going to do with my money? So they want to see that, oh, if we're in the idea phase, for example, we're going to use your money to do user and product validation. So we're going to use the money to do some market research, to go around and make a very simple prototype on paper to get feedback from users. And then once we get through that, we'll develop a product, which is a very simple version of the product. And then we'll show it to people to make sure that the product is validated. So you might say that, oh, I need $20,000 to do those two phases. It's going to take us 6 months to get there. And once we get there, we'll get back to you, Mr. Investor, to share with you what we learned in that period, and then see if there can be a further on investment. So, and if the money is bigger, then it even becomes more important, because sometimes people raise like 3 million, 5 million, which lasts them for 1 or 2 years. Then you need to show exactly what are you going to do with that money, and also what have you done with the previous investors' money. Sometimes I see that is lacking in pitch decks for people that are already further ahead. They don't show that, oh, I used money and this is what I learned from it, because eventually that's what early stage investors are looking at. I give you money, what did you learn? Because they know that you're not going to hit it big straight from the beginning. Yeah, that's my answer, Vishnu.
Yes, thank you, Hugo. And we have one more question from Vikram. Let me read it out. How did you get clients for outsourcing other than using online websites?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, well, when I started, this was still kind of a blue ocean at least in Holland, because I saw the US was outsourcing on a big scale to India, and this is also what triggered me. So I thought in Holland, the same thing is going to happen. Right now, it's a very bloody red ocean. I don't know if you know the concept blue ocean, red ocean, but the red ocean is where a lot of Indian companies and Ukrainians and Russians and South Americans are pitching to the same client or spamming them in LinkedIn or emails. So I think right now is a very challenging market. But at that time, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of a sales guy, so I just started cold calling people. I looked in my network, who do I know? Anybody who was willing to have a coffee with me, I would just go out and meet them. And I think online websites can be a source, but again, because of this red ocean nowadays, I'm not sure that it is, because LinkedIn is just every day. Even me, I have my own outsourcing company in India, and every day I get an email or an invite in LinkedIn from people who want to sell me outsourcing services, and I start declining all of that. So it's tough. At that time, it worked, and I think it's about also being a bit deaf and just go for it and approach people. That's what I did.
Thank you, Hugo. And Vikram, I hope you got the answer. And we have one more question. Science KS asks, can you talk a bit about building a startup in vertical manner without taking any funds from VC and angels?
I'm not sure what vertical manner means, but I assume it means bootstrapping. Yeah, so, I think the key is if you start a service company like the two that I have started, I actually think you don't need any investment, because you need a laptop and a phone, but usually you have enough resources to get it, or you already have one. And then you can just start talking to people and start generating business. If you're trying to develop a product, the problem is if you want to develop the full product and then go to market, you will need a lot of money. So the key is, again, what I said before, you need to start thinking about how can I make a very simple version of my product, and then with that simple version, go through user validation, product validation, market validation. Right, so user validation means you speak to users to see what do they need. So maybe, as I said, you first select people or a group of people that you want to serve. You start discussing with them what are their problems, what are their needs. Could be related to your product, could also be about their lives. Once you have uncovered the needs and the issues that the users have in relation to your product, then you start doing product validation. So you show them a working prototype and people need to click something. And then once the product is validated, so people really like to use it, you can actually also show that with data, not only people saying, oh, I love your product, but validate it with clicks and data. And then you can go to market validation, meaning that I can actually use that product and then sell it to a bigger amount of people. I think up until that point, you should be able to do that with limited money. Especially so the ideal founders team for a tech company is a CEO, a CTO, and a CMO. Now, if those three founders start a startup as a side job, or maybe one of them leaves this job, the CTO, and the others, everybody chips in with a little bit of money so the guy can survive, the other two keep their job, then the CTO can do all the work for which you normally would pay somebody. And then with those three, you can actually make it through those first phases, because the longer you can go without investment, the more shares you will keep on your side. So I think it's about being creative on thinking, how can I do these three phases without getting anybody's money, or with a tiny bit of money which I can get from myself or from some of my friends. And adding to that, I also think that if there is a way to grow a company without getting this investor on board, you're actually better off. Because although for most people it looks like having an investor is great, all those people are going to push you to give you ROI. They're going to mix into the decisions you're making. They're going to tell you what kind of market or product to build. And if you want to keep your freedom, then I think it's better to go without any investor at all. But sometimes it's not possible depending on your product.
Thank you, Hugo. And this is really going very interesting and interactive. We've got one more question from Hanifa. He asks, how do we find product market fit?
Yeah. It's a tough question, I think. I think you find product market fit when you know you found it. I find it very challenging because I've had multiple tries myself at building a product, and it's very tough because you need to find a balance between your ideas that this is how the product should look and still keeping your feet on the ground, realizing this is what the users need and getting the data and feedback from the users that are true. They are not the ones you oftentimes get biased by feedback from people because you want them to tell you that this is okay and just continue. So I think for a product, it's a very challenging thing, and I'm not so good at this, but I do think that if you look at, for example, Steve Blank's materials, he has these, customer user validation, product validation, etc. And there's a list of metrics, so there's staged approaches to this with clear metrics and deliverables and outcomes that you need to create in each of those phases. So I think it's about using some of that wisdom from Steve Blank or Eric Ries or any other author, and going about it in a sort of scientific and structured way, not just going with gut feel. If you build a product, now if it's a service company, I think it's easier because service companies are usually relying on stories, on the knowledge of the founder. So to validate something could mean as little as I tell a story and I tell them how I would help the person. Or it could be I make a PDF or a PowerPoint which explains my background, my track record, how I've helped other people. And then I present it to somebody and I hear what the people are saying. And when they say something to me, they give me feedback, then the next time I make a different pitch deck or a new proposal for this person. So I think in there, it's easier to find, let's say, service market fit. Yeah. But for products, better to look at the experts like Eric Ries and Steve Blank than me.
Yeah, thank you, Hugo.
You know that, Hanifa, because in Bridge, we've had this discussion a long time, how to start products. It's not that easy.
Yes. Still struggling with that.
No, I gave up on that.
Okay. Okay.
And any more questions? Just feel free to ask to him directly, or you can type in the chat box.
I think we also reached the time box, so people may want to go back to their job. Or maybe some people want to start their startup right now.
You've really sparked the entrepreneurial spirit, I guess. We had a lot of questions. That was nice.
Yeah, Hugo. It is everyone wants to start, but it is not that easy.
And it's also not that hard.
Oh, yeah, correct. Yes,
and if you wrote down any blockers earlier, as Hugo asked, you can just shoot that one also. You can ask
I joined late in this meeting. I just saw this in the LinkedIn that Vishnu shared. So just joined now. So I may look into much of these sessions. If you have in future, I will definitely join. And I'm also running to another meeting that is already scheduled. So it was unexpected. So Hugo, next time when we have such a meeting, I'll definitely join starting. And we have a lot of things to discuss. I think Hugo can input on that. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Hanifa.
Okay.
I think, Preeti, you have a pitching competition somewhere soon, right? Maybe you can share that.
Yes, I'll be sharing that. And thank you, Hugo, for answering all the questions and for the great presentation. It was a pleasure to have you with us. And before we conclude, as I said in the beginning, let me throw some light on the upcoming business idea pitching contest that we are planning to conduct in 2023. I'll just share a screen which details out everything. Hang with me for a minute. Yes, this is, we are planning for the 2023 edition of TechWhizz. It's actually all the potential entrepreneurs, all the wannabe entrepreneurs with or without startup can attend this contest. It's a pitching idea pitching competition. So you can pitch your business idea to an expert panel. So there will be experts, there can be investors as well. And it will definitely hone your pitching skills, and you can get the right suggestions to improve your idea. And it would be a great learning opportunity for future entrepreneurs. And as Hugo has already presented some business pitching tips as well in his session. So we'll be updating all the details in our website, bridgeglobal.com/TechWhizz soon. And we'll be, once this thing is scheduled, we'll be updating all of you guys, and please stay tuned. Okay, and thanks for joining. It was great having all of you with us. And Hugo, thank you once again.
Yeah.
All the attendees, thank you once again for
Thanks.
finding time to join us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hugo.
For joining.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
It was a great talk.
Yeah, you too. Enjoy. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi.
Thank you.